All right, folks, we're going to wait just one more minute and we will get started. Looks like we have most of the folks who were in the waiting room have now been let in, but we will be with you shortly. Okay, well, hello everyone. Welcome to, what is it? Is it Tuesday evening? It is. Okay, good. This week's getting away from me. We are delighted and we are honored that you're here to spend a little bit of time tonight talking about the Understanding Your Water series and what that meant to and for you and what it could mean to and for broader groups of residents around the region. My name is Daniel Rossi Keene. I am the Executive Director of RiverWise, and I will be steering this ship, to use a water metaphor, this evening. Let me briefly tell you what, I could take this really far, I was going to talk about what our voyage consists of, but I'll stop, I promise. Let me tell you what we're in for tonight here. Really four main elements of this evening's gathering. We'll take just a moment and get some introductions, get a sense of who's in the room, and we'd like to hear just very little bit from each of you during that time. We'll have an opportunity then to hear directly from a real live in the wild water authority official. We will introduce her in just a moment. We'll also then have an opportunity to ask the experts, so both our water official, but also Dr. Rodney Austin, who you all have spent some time with if you've seen these films. And then I'd like to end the evening with a discussion about the value of this brief intervention, or this brief, I guess, entree into community education around water, and really hope to understand more carefully some of your motivations and some of the things that we might be able to do more effectively to help create communities of care around these issues. So that's the broad agenda, and we're going to be relatively loose, relatively fluid, and see how this, and see how this shakes out. So with that, I would like to turn things over to Kelly, Managing Director of RiverWise, and she's going to briefly figure out who's here and just a couple other quick things about each of you. Go ahead, Kelly.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kelly Powell. I am Managing Director of RiverWise. And in true RiverWise fashion, we're going to do introductions and kind of round robin. This doesn't have to be super formal. We're just looking for your name, what community you're from, or what organization, or if you want to share both, you can do that. How would you rate your water knowledge, beginner, intermediate, or expert? And what actually motivated you to attend this evening? So I'm just going to kind of hop around the list that I'm looking at and see if we can get everybody just to get a sense of who's in the room. So let's start with Carrie Pohl. So you will have to unmute yourself.
Thanks. I'm trying to get in on my computer. I'm on my phone right now. So I'm in Aliquippa, and I'm a member of the Sisters of St. Joseph of Baden. And I would rank my water knowledge to be medium to high. Did I answer everything?
And what motivated you to attend tonight?
Oh, I just want to learn more.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Next, let's do Victoria.
Hi, sorry. Yes, hi, I'm Victoria. I live in Pittsburgh and Squirrel Hill. I think my knowledge is beginner level and also just want to know more about what's happening with the water.
Perfect. All right. How about Bethany?
Hi, I'm Bethany Warren. I live in Beaver Falls, right down the road from Dr. Austin. And I'm actually on the board for the Water Authority along with Dr. Austin. And I would say I'm still learning quite a lot about our water system and always looking to learn more. And I just was really happy to be here to support the Water Authority and Dr. Austin and Tracy, and just to be transparently available for people as a board.
Awesome. Thank you. How about Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Paget. I am a community filmmaker. With my business, Human City Creative. I'm contracted through RiverWise to do video storytelling in our area around a bunch of different aspects of the eco district. And yeah, I would say that my knowledge is probably beginner still with water, and partly I'm, with doing community storytelling, I'm always looking to know more and hear what people want to know and what they don't know, I guess, so that we can tell stories around it. So
Awesome. Thank you. How about Clifford?
Yeah, good evening, all of you. I'm Dr. Clifford Lau. I teach chemistry and environmental science. And so I'm always interested in learning more about water. I live in Moon, and I've been involved with the Moon Water Authority concerning PFAS and all the other things that can be in your water.
Perfect. Well, thanks for joining us. How about Josh?
I'm an analytical lab technician living in Ohio, but I was a student of Dr. Austin's when I was attending Geneva College, and I learned about the event through Facebook.
Okay, great. And what would you say your knowledge level is?
It's hard to say. I guess intermediate. I haven't specifically studied water chemistry, but I would be interested in learning more about it.
Okay, great. Thank you. How about Leslie? Leslie, you are muted if you're speaking.
I've become one of those people. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No,
We've all done that.
I make fun of everybody else for doing that all the time. I'm from Chippewa, and my knowledge, I would say, is probably beginner. And I saw the event on Facebook, and I have a desire to be well informed and just a concern for our water and air quality at this time. So I just feel it's important to be a part of whatever's going on so that I can be informed and an advocate.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us. I don't think did I get everybody? If you didn't get a chance to say hello, unmute yourself.
Kelly, why are you here?
Oh, I'm the managing director of RiverWise, and I definitely have beginner water knowledge. And I think it's important as something that we cover in our eco districts, that I grow my knowledge in that area. So that's why I'm here.
Fair enough. And Becky, did you get a chance to
yeah,
chime
I just
in?
unmuted. I was keeping muted because it's loud here.
I understand.
We understand that.
I just threatened my children before we went on screen, so.
Yes, I was doing that before I unmuted. So I found out about this through Dr. Rodney Austin, who's a friend. I live in Beaver Falls, Patterson Heights area. My knowledge is probably like beginner intermediate. I've done some water related things. Like I took a stormwater management class, like a day seminar once, not around here in Maryland, actually. And that kind of was the beginning of my interest in water and how cities and places manage water. Took the rain barrel class at the conservation district. So things like that. Yeah, so, but I'm interested to learn more. I'm always interested. I started buying drinking water after I found out that they were dumping fracking water in the river about 10, 15 years ago, like in Lawrence County. And so that was like when I started becoming more interested in my water here specifically, and the rivers and what we're drinking and things like that. So.
Well, thanks for joining us.
Yeah.
We had somebody jump in and then we lost him. So if he comes back on, then I'll have him do an intro. But I think otherwise everybody has been said hello.
All right, thank you, Kelly. And Tracy and Dr. Austin, we'll give you plenty of time to catch up with the crew in a minute here. So we'll keep folks in suspense. Let me just say, you know, I would identify my technical knowledge of water as beginner, and feel like there's so much to learn, and I approach this, I hope, with a level of curiosity and humility, recognizing that this is a critically important issue for our region and our communities, and yeah, we have a lot of competence to develop, and a lot of ways to grow in that. You know, my motivation primarily, I think, is really to understand how we can better assist communities become more activated around issues they care about. And as we've bounced from community to community and talked to various organizations and individuals, you know, water comes up again and again as a felt concern. And so we're always trying to think about how we can do a better job of organizing community power and voice, and growing civic agency around identified issues that residents and organizations care about. So it's actually not a bad setup to introducing RiverWise. So I guess I'm on the docket for this piece. Briefly, just want to explain to you what RiverWise is and aspires to be, and try and give you a bit of a sense why we think and care about water, and why we have rolled out this particular education series. So RiverWise was founded in the fall of 2018. The idea for the organization, and in many different ways, have been kind of in the air for quite a little while. If you know anything about Beaver County, you'll know that was, and we continue to live in a time of considerable change, and some would even say upheaval. You know, some of that motivated by $7 billion petrochemical facility in the heart of the county. And there was this growing sense that organizations and residents and municipalities were really not well prepared and not well organized to respond to the forces that were kind of leaning into their communities. And so RiverWise was formed with this this vision, really, of getting organizations, individuals, municipalities working more effectively together across municipal boundaries to articulate a vision for the future, implement projects that were meaningful to multiple constituencies, and really level up our capacity to enact what I would call sort of civic or public agency in a county that had kind of, in many respects, lost the sense that residents were an integral part of planning their future. You know, if you talk to many residents in Beaver County, certainly around 2018, and I think, you know, there are still folks that would say this, you know, they don't understand how they are part of the future story of our region. And so RiverWise has really been working to push back against that idea that we're powerless to do anything about how our communities evolve and what they become. We've done a number of projects along the way, and some of those projects look really similarly aligned to one another, and some of them look like, wow, that's weird, you know, like you're planting a garden in this community and you're messing with water over here, and you're doing community education over there. And if you look across the broad swath of activity that RiverWise has undertaken, and you look at any one piece, you might not understand the connection between the various, or you might not understand the whole between all those pieces. But at its core, RiverWise has really been interested in organizing community power and voice around identified issues that the community cares about. Now, one of the ways we have been doing that is through this framework that some of you may have heard of called an eco-district model. There's lots of things we could say about eco-districts, and I won't say most all of them here tonight. But briefly, let me say, when we started thinking back in 2018 about how we could most effectively organize community voice and power in Beaver County, we conducted a months-long assessment of where we perceived there to be momentum and opportunity in Beaver County. There was a lot of momentum and a lot of opportunity, but we had to make some hard decisions. And so we made a decision to plant a flag, as it were, in 3 communities that you see here on the screen. One in the north in Beaver Falls, one at the confluence of our rivers in Monaca, and one in Aliquippa. And we identified each of those communities as an eco-district community. An eco-district is it's a framework, it's a way of thinking or seeing community and economic development activity. And this way of thinking and seeing about community development really attempts to foreground holistic thinking. So rather than just thinking about the economics of a community, eco-district thinking wants to understand these 6 different systems that exist at the heart of community life. You see those on the right-hand side of the screen. So food systems, water systems, energy, air, mobility, and equity. And the idea is that if we're going to have healthy communities, if we're going to have communities that are moving forward in ways that are sustainable, in ways that are broadly beneficial, we have to be thinking through at least these 6 different grids. And there are other grids, of course, but these are the 6 that eco-district thinking tends to prioritize. And so RiverWise has suites of activity in each of these different 6 categories, and we could explain those in a different context, or I'd be happy to talk to you offline about them. But one of the key areas, obviously, is water. And so we have endeavored in this series to understand better our public water systems, a little bit about private water, and try to understand how that's connected to broader community realities here in Beaver County. So it's a real quick overview, and there's lots more to be said. If you want to understand more about our eco-district framework, I would encourage you to Google a document called Sustainable Steps. Sustainable Steps Toward a Regional Identity for Beaver County. Sustainable Steps Toward a Regional Identity for Beaver County. You'll find a 100-page or so document that outlines what these communities have said around these priorities, and how that thinking is being envisioned in at least these 3 eco-district communities. I did briefly just want to highlight one catalytic project that, in full disclosure, has gone sort of on hold since the municipal borough manager of Monaca moved on. But we wanted to elevate this one example of some planning and thinking that we were doing. And this was initially in Monaca. Spent, I don't know, several tens of thousands of dollars and well over a year reflecting on the municipal water system and the energy grid in Monaca. And we're trying to, we were planning to solarize and integrate a number of different electrical assets in the borough of Monaca to create municipal scale solar that could run their water authority, their sewage treatment plant. And these are just a couple pictures where we studied the various pieces of the water infrastructure and tried to understand, what the energy burden was of those various pieces of infrastructure, try to understand how we could get that carbon neutral. And I share this simply as an aspiration of the kinds of things that RiverWise has been thinking about to connect our broader eco-district priorities with tangible activity in the life of the community. So, okay, that is a real brief introduction to the work of RiverWise, why we care about water, what we think eco-districts, or why we think eco-district thinking is valuable and important. And by my accounts, I have 1 minute left to spare, so that's exciting. At this point, I want to stop talking and turn the conversation over to Tracy Price. Tracy is operations manager at the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority. This is the real live expert that we were talking about. Tracy can tell you a little bit about what she does and maybe why she does it. I've asked her to consider 3 possible questions, and then basically said, tell us whatever you want, Tracy. But the 3 broad questions that I had mentioned were, what is your role at the Water Authority? What are some of your challenges? And how can the community best interact with you and other local officials? So Tracy's going to provide that kind of introduction to her work and the broader work of being a water official here in Beaver County. We'll then hear from Rodney, Dr. Austin, and then we will turn our attention to more sort of conversational stuff. So yeah, jot down any notes you have. Tracy, I will go on mute and we'll turn it over to you.
Thank you for the introduction. Tracy Price, Beaver Falls Municipal Authority. I started out back in 1999 as the distribution sample collection girl when I attended Geneva College. So I was fairly familiar with the distribution system. I had that job for about 5 years. I resurfaced with the Water Authority in 2012 as a plant operator. I had 5 years in the plant actually treating and making the water. I was promoted to production foreman January of 2018. And just recently, I'm transitioning into operations manager, where I oversee distribution, production, and maintenance. I have a little bit of a learning curve for the distribution end. We have a lot of miles of main and a lot of aging infrastructure. So that will be pretty much my biggest hurdle, I think. The plant is also very old. We've made some updates. We have all new filter media. We've upgraded our ammonia feed system. We have a filter press where we treat the sludge from the byproducts of water treatment. But that's I'm just getting into distribution, so I can't really answer a whole lot of questions over there, but I will try to field any that you have. I would say infrastructure is probably the biggest thing. A lot of our miles of main date back to the late 1800s. So those are going to be difficult to replace. When you find leaks, sometimes they get away in a storm sewer and nobody ever loses pressure. So we don't know for months that we even have a leak. Those are probably my biggest challenges right now. COVID hit hard. A lot of the parts that we need are unavailable because there's some PLC hold up for chips, and anything for controlling processes is behind. Thankfully, chemical suppliers haven't really hit us hard. There was a small glitch in 2021 where we thought for a little bit I wouldn't be able to get chlorine, but that passed. So I would say now infrastructure is probably my biggest hurdle, which we are hoping to tackle head on, but everything takes time. And community involvement, I actually have some residents that call directly if they see anything on the river, if the river's a weird color, if there's a sheen. I have one customer that walks her dog across the Eastvale Bridge. So she makes sure that if she notices anything out of the ordinary, she calls. Another customer emailed the bfwater.info, sort of like the hotline for the water authority. She sent pictures of a creek behind her house that was blue. So anything like of that nature is well worth our interest. And I think for community involvement, that's, you know, ways that help us. Because although there's someone on duty all the time and, you know, it spills and stuff don't always get reported until it's too late. That kind of stuff would be helpful.
All right, Tracy, can I ask just a couple quick questions?
Yeah.
Can you explain the reach of the water authority?
Yes.
Can you explain a little bit about, like, talk to me like I'm your grandmother, like the water comes out of the air, it lands somewhere in Beaver Falls. How does it get to you? Like, what happens? Sort of, can you explain sort of the water cycle in Beaver Falls?
Sure. The water is
And
drawn from the
Good.
Beaver River. And then we start our process at the intake where we add potassium permanganate to oxidize out the manganese and iron, because depending on the season and depending on the rainfall, those can vary pretty much, and you don't want that in your tap water. We also feed a chemical called Earth Tech, which is basically an algicide, because the river is occasionally polluted with zebra mussels that can burn up our pumps. It also helps with total organic carbon removal, which plays a part in TTHM and HAA removal later down the line for us. From the intake, it gets pumped up to our primary basin, where we add alum for coagulation, soda ash for pH and alkalinity adjustment. We add carbon for taste and odor complaints. From there, it goes to our secondary basin, where we add fluoride. We have the potential to add more soda ash and carbon if necessary. And then from there, it goes into the filter gallery, where we have 8 filters. 6 can do 1 MGD a day and 2 can do 2, which gives us a combined total of 10 million if we need it. We're normally only bringing in about 6. From there, we add a post-chlorine dose when it leaves the filters before it goes into the clear well. So from the clear well, it makes its contact time, which is very important in the water world to kill the viruses. At the end of the clear well, we are now feeding a chemical called liquid ammonium sulfate, which combines with the free chlorine to form chloramines, monochloramine specifically. And then it goes out into our large distribution system, which ranges from out Route 18, where the racetrack is on Pendale Road, all the way out to South Beaver past Blackhawk High School. In the lower valley, we service to Freedom, but then we also sell to Conway. We sell to North Swickley. We sell to Zayanople, and we also sell to New Swickley. So we cover Beaver Falls, New Brighton, Rochester, Freedom, going along 65, and then we sell to the additional consecutives. So it is a fairly large service area.
Do you have any sense of how many customers that encompasses?
About 50,000.
So about a third of the county.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I was a humanities major, Tracy, so I don't know what you just said, but it sounds important. I appreciate. Certainly sounds like a thoughtful, detailed, important process. And can you talk a little bit about I mean, you're not the one over there like dumping all these chemicals in all day, right? I mean, you have a staff, there's a team.
I used to be.
Okay.
No, so there's 6 fantastic operators at the plant now. They work around the clock, 24/7, 365. There's always someone in the chair. They are the ones dumping and adding these very important chemicals to make sure the water meets all the regulations.
And then one other question. Can you explain, I know you have two board members here. We're going to hear from Dr. Austin in a second. Like, what is that all about? Like, why is there a board? What is their function? How do they interface with
Dr.
activity of
Austin
the-
may have to explain this a little bit better than me, because although I've had 5 years attending the board meetings and they are a governing body, he might be able to weigh in on that one better.
All right, well, why don't we hold that then and save that for
Yeah, save
when
that
we
for
run
the
over-
expert.
All right, help me remember that, Rodney. We'll start with that
Okay, we'll do
question. Okay, Tracy, I appreciate your introduction to these issues. Again, lots to learn, lots to understand. We will certainly come back to you in a moment, but I'm going to turn our attention over to the movie star of the group, Dr. Rodney Austin, and the fella at the heart of the modules that we've been pushing out. So Dr. Austin and I don't know, we've crossed paths a number of different ways. Beaver Falls is kind of like that. Geneva is kind of like that. Beaver County is kind of like that. A couple of years or so ago, we started talking about, I think the way I described it was leveling up average residents' awareness around issues related to water quality. And so Dr. Austin was excited about that and said, yeah, love to work on this thing with you. And not with you, he did all the work. He sat down and started building out these modules and coming up with content, and really I think we kind of thought of it as a 100 level introduction to a handful of issues around local water quality. And so my expectation is you've seen at least one, maybe all of those modules now. Dr. Austin is here as the kind of the voice on the screen. And what I'd really love to do, I don't know if you want to sort of say anything to get rolling here, or if you just want to open up for questions, Rodney, but give you an opportunity to say whatever you want, I guess.
Yeah, no, thank you. And by the way, yeah, I can always be Rodney. You don't have to call me Dr. Austin, but unless you choose to. But yeah, so I thank you for hosting me. It's actually been a great collaboration, Daniel. It's probably been, 2 years or so that we've been meeting occasionally by Zoom meeting and thinking about this and thinking about the reasons for having the videos. And so, yeah, it's been a great thing. And so I'll just also add that Tracy's been a big help sometimes in some of the research, and she's a little bit more humble, but she actually has a couple engineering degrees, I think a chemistry degree from Geneva, and really has been at this since 1999. So she knows a lot about our water authority. Yeah, I'll just say, yeah, thank you for having this and for joining us. Just a little bit about me. I'm not going to talk about myself a lot, but just where I'm coming from is I first started actually right out of college as a water treatment operator. So like Tracy, operating the plant, pulling all the buttons and everything else. And this was back in the 90s in Northern Kentucky. And so that was my first introduction to water. I really hadn't thought of doing that in undergraduate, but it was a nice job and it seemed fun. And so it was for a couple of years. And then I went on and got a graduate degree in chemistry and started teaching. And in North Carolina, I taught a class about water issues. And I moved here to Beaver Falls in Geneva and developed another course related to water issues. And then I've got a couple of students testing water. And in fact, we work with Tracy and the Water Authority to grab samples every 2 weeks and do some additional testing. So, so I've had a little bit of background in water testing. I'm a biochemist by training. So that also helps with my interest, since most organisms are mostly water. And so when I had the opportunity with Daniel to do this, I thought this would be a great thing. So just to let you know, I live here in Beaver Falls. Again, as Bethany said, we're close together, and near Tracy as well. And so I live here, I drink the water. My kids go to the schools in the district. And so, and my son's a swimmer, right? So he's in the swimming pool right now as we speak, finishing up some training down at Beaver Falls High School. So, I have an interest in water. And so, we're living and drinking it. So we're just not far away. And so I really have an interest in, and I have a passion in helping people understand more about their water, because really, some people can be quite scared, especially with the cracker plant that Daniel mentioned, or just news they hear. And so all sorts of things. And so, so really excited to be part of here. Also, full disclosure, as Daniel said, I'm a member of the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority. So, so I have that, and just in terms of that being part of my background. But also, I want to point out, I come at this, not that all municipal water is perfect, right? It's not a perfect world. And so there are issues that do crop up, whether it be in the river, as we talked about, maybe being, as Tracy talked about, someone walking the dog across the river looking for maybe something, a sheen, oily something on the river. But what I'll point out is that most municipal water, and really most bottled water in the United States, is really good to drink. All right. And so there are issues for both bottled water and municipal water, but that's where we need to be educated and think about this. And particularly if we're part of a municipal sort of nonprofit, you know, we can attend meetings and those are really open. And even if they're private, they need to be open. There's documents that we talk about. And so that's really one of the things that I made in the videos. All right, making sure that you can find out who your water provider is, finding out where to get your annual report from them, and then also thinking about reading this annual report, which sometimes for someone who's a humanities major, right, Daniel, you may not understand all of the units and everything else that's there. And so a little bit of these videos says, hey, all right, this is really at least a little bit of a way to an on-ramp to understand a little bit more what comes in the videos, what comes in your report through these videos. That's why I helped make those and really was excited to do that. And sometimes, you know, really, it's also good information. And I know Tracy and I were just texting last couple of days about a report from the New York Times where there was a man who was in charge of a water district in Vermont, and he intentionally lowered the fluoride levels because he somehow thought something he read on the internet that it wasn't good for you. And so that, of course, is not permitted. And he admitted that he probably should not have listened to some voices that he found just, you know, randomly talking about fluorine. And so with those types of stories out there and scariness, this would just be a great way to provide some education for the average person, or maybe some people even on this video. I mean, we have some folks that are really quite educated in terms of science, and so maybe they would find a use as well. But I think that's, you know, I don't want to talk about all day, and I know we're here to answer questions. So if there is a question, or Daniel, if you have something, I'd be more than happy, or Tracy as well, to talk about.
All right. Well, thank you, Rodney. Helpful context for sure. Understanding where your water comes from is valuable.
Yeah.
Understanding where your answers come from is valuable too. So thanks for getting us back to the source, Rodney. All right. So at this point, we'll maybe come back to the question about the role of the Water Authority, but I would love to open up the floor to those of you who have joined us. Really, I don't know, there's no rules at this point, I guess, other than be kind. But other than that, we would love to field any questions. I'm not going to field any questions. Rodney and Tracy maybe field questions that you might have about what you saw in the films, or what you are experiencing in your community, or what you would like to experience. Yeah, the floor is yours. Carrie, I see your hand. Well, sort of. Now I see your hand. For real.
Let me know if I start breaking up, because my internet's not real stable tonight.
Fair enough.
So thank you for the videos, and thank you for this session, first of all. One of the things that concerns me with the petrochemical buildup in our region isn't just the Shell plant. It's also pipelines that are being built. It's also the drilling that's happening for the wells. And I don't see on the reports, either on the Aliquippa Water Authority or on the Ambridge Water Authority, there are reports that I don't see any testing for PFAS, which is in drilling fluids. I don't see testing for radium, which can be brought up during the fracking process. And so is there a place where we can get that information?
So to answer your question, so some of those are tested for occasionally, like for instance, the radium, and Tracy might be, but I think, you know, most authorities have to test every 2 or 3 years for radium. Is that right, Tracy?
Yes.
Yes. And the PFAS is probably something that's new. So there are lots of things we can test for. And I think that one's probably tested for on more of a as needed, or maybe it's probably right now becoming more where maybe you have to test for it every year or 2 years, or if there is an issue, or if there's no, you know, if it becomes something that's known to happen.
Hey, PFAS is kind of voluntary at this point. It is coming up in the next UCMR 5 study, which should start to take place next spring. So then these municipalities will be forced to test. I did it voluntarily, hoping to clear our name, and it was in the Beaver River. So now we test basically twice a year just to see where my levels are, to make sure that it's not getting out of hand based on, what the state recommends. It was 70 parts per trillion total, but now they're focusing in on the PFBA and the PFOA, I believe.
That's right.
So, yeah, and those limits were 8 and 14. But from my personal testing, those were not my biggest contributors. My biggest contributor was the PFX S or B.
Okay.
So,
yeah. And I guess, so you like from a municipal water authority perspective, like there's a list of things that you test for that's kind of dictated by the EPA, yeah?
DEP, yes.
Okay, or the DEP?
Yes.
The DEP, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You get your yearly set of samples that you're required to do. Those include VOCs, IOCs, your weekly back T samples that you need out in your distribution system. The radioactives, I do think, are every 3 years, because I have not hit those yet in my position, but I do believe they're coming up. There's asbestos sampling coming up. There's a set that you get every February, and that's what you're responsible for that time frame.
Okay, yeah, because I just looked at the reports for 2021. I didn't go back to like 2020 and 2019. So they could be in there.
And if they do test for the PFAS themselves, if they would get results, even though it's voluntary, I listed it in my CCR, so it should be in there.
Yeah, no, there were very few things in either of the CCRs, to be honest with you. I want to say like maybe at most 8 things that it looks like they tested for.
Sorry.
But I know, yeah, I remember, but that was last year, so maybe there was other stuff from previous years.
When I first took over, one of the gentlemen that retired from the DEP helped me with my CCR. So maybe that's why, he told me I was better to err on the side of transparency, put it in there, because you obviously ran the samples.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Carrie, thank you for the question, and Tracy and Rodney for the tag team answer. Other questions, either about the science or the mechanics of running a facility, or what it's like to be on a board? Something's going on in your community, maybe.
All right.
Carrie,
I'll
welcome.
do another one. If nobody else has questions, I'll do another one.
Yeah.
Go for it.
So my congregation was part of working toward a source water protection plan for the Ambridge Water Authority. It seems to have stalled. And so, like, does your municipality have a source water protection plan, and like, how do you keep it moving?
We had a source water protection plan drawn up in 2018, and it is very hard to keep it moving. I've joined every group I could possibly join, from RAIN, which is River Action Incident Notification, to I joined the Waterworks Operators Association of Pennsylvania, just so that I could network myself and make sure that I had somebody upstream to sort of share information with me. We also partnered with Orsanko, which is the Ohio branch of water awareness, I guess, because the Mahoning is one of our tributaries that comes into the Beaver, which is sort of a hot spot for chemical dumping, maybe.
Yeah, well, I think Orsanko covers like 8 states. I think it's like along
They
the
are
Ohio River.
A wealth of information, and they're great to have on your side. So
thank you. It looks like Kelly put a question in the chat box, so I will put myself back on mute.
Yeah,
you're good.
Yeah, I'll just add, I'm typing it, but yeah, so source water protection plan is really, and Tracy can jump in here, it's really a plan to help think about, your source. So the source water is like the river or the well or wherever you're getting your water from, typically rivers and wells. And so thinking about monitoring that for any chemical species that could be in there, and having a plan to know, where it comes, where your water is coming from, and to test and to monitor for that. So the rain that she talked about, the Institute, the rain, or Sanko, these are all folks that are monitoring and looking for various compounds in the water. So in Beaver Falls, we're getting our water, as Tracy pointed out, from the Beaver River. Interestingly enough, the Beaver River is about 23 miles long and goes and starts up in Newcastle. And so from Newcastle, it's the Mahoning, which comes in from Ohio, and the Shenango meeting there at Newcastle, and then flows south, and the Connequenessing there at Elwood City drops into it. So we really have a lot of places that we pull water from. And so even one of the issues that Tracy was mentioning, someone walking over the river looking for sheen, we actually had some issues where we had something on the water and we're testing and finding some benzene in the water, which is a chemical compound, which shouldn't be there. And Orsanko was detecting it down in Cincinnati, and they kept coming back up the river. And of course, we detected it, and they kept helping us because they're a large organization. And so they kept going back up the river, and they actually went back into Mahoning and back over into the Ohio, and still found some sources of this. So part of that plan would be, hey, all right, let's make sure we know where our water is coming from, and then also how to monitor and to test for it. And so having that as a source water protection plan so that we can sort of be on the front end if something does happen. And so our Sanko's really helped us. Tracy, is that sort of, am I getting at the heart of it?
That's the heart of it. And they basically assess your watershed for any kind of facilities along the watershed that could be contributors to any kind of contamination. And they give you a nice list.
Yeah. And just to Carrie's point, those are, because there are so many components, as Tracy pointed out, you're trying to find all the factories, all the chemical plants, all of places, like shell plants or anywhere else, even like a sewage plant or farm, whatever else it would be that is near the river or the rivers, streams that are coming into it, and trying to match all of those, and then trying to think about what you should test for and look for. And so it's a really complex document, a really complex issue. And so, which is why, trying to put a plan together is one, helpful, but then also two, can be quite a challenge, just because there's so much to think about out there. But there are plans, and we have them in place, and everybody has, and recently, I can't remember how long ago, we had a source water assessment, I think is what they call it. So we figured out what our source water is, and so I think that's published. And is that about 5 years ago, Tracy, that we had that, or longer?
Yeah, I think it was 2018.
Yeah, 2018. And so again, they were just trying to assess, sort of as part of this plan, but assess really what the water quality is.
So I'm going to ask a question sort of as Daniel and sort of as a hypothetical community resident. You can figure out which is which, maybe. I live in Aliquippa, and we actually found out recently that we have lead service to our home. And they've done daylighting of a number of houses in various communities. Depending on who you talk to and where they live, you might hear about sort of highly variable water quality. And in my experience, that often manifests itself in some combination of complaining all the way over to sort of organizing and activating, and you get everything in between, right? And I think a lot of people would argue that you've got this old broken system, and it's I heard recently that 50% of the water produced by the water authority ends up lost to leaks and all this sort of stuff. So here's my question: like, how can residents, like, other than yelling about things that they don't like, how can they have an effective and meaningful relationship with a municipal water authority board, with an operations manager? Like, help us get into your brain and understand like how to approach you, what kind of information to gather, what does a productive community partnership look like around these issues?
Yeah. So Dan, you bring up a good point. So the lead service lines is actually an important one. And, most municipalities, including Aliquippa and Beaver Falls, we actually have money to help replace some of those service lines. And so, in fact, one of the biggest issues is that customers may know they have service line, and I think just because they don't really want to think about it, they sort of don't get their line replaced, even though in some cases like Aliquippa, it's free. I mean, there's money there to help, free or low cost really to actually get those replaced. And by the way, we have those service lines, and all communities. A big part of it, some of it's on the customer side. So they have a line that goes from their meter into their house, or from the curb into their house, and that is theirs that they put in. And so that needs replaced. But other times the municipalities can have lead on their side. So either a lead line, or it's some of the solder and other things that has lead in them. And so we're trying to get, trying to protect for that. One of the ways that people protect by that is adding something known as orthophosphate, and that tends to coat the lines and those soldering points. And so there's no contact with the water with those in that case. And so most of the time the water quality is good, even in houses that, and Tracy's tested, where we have known lead lines and they haven't been replaced, we actually have really low lead because of this known way to actually protect it. But your other question about how to interact with the municipal board is all municipalities have to have a meeting once a month. And so there are open meetings. There's the open part and there's the executive session. But the open part is where residents can come and ask questions. They can come and complain. They can come and do whatever else they need to. And so there's an open session. And we have those, and we don't have somebody at every session, but we definitely 3 or 4 times a year, we have people who come. Sometimes it's about billing. Sometimes it's about an issue that they're having. And usually we're really receptive because we don't in fact get a lot of people. And so when someone comes, we know it must be a pretty big deal. And so our manager and particularly sort of the folks who are out in replacing meters and that type of thing, we can get them out the next day to test. And so even if, even if your water, they think about having a leak, we can send the water meter person out and they can check for that. So going to the meetings, just giving a phone call, sending an email. I think Tracy mentioned something about an email, about information. Those are all ways. And most municipalities are fairly receptive because usually there are people like us that are working, people that live in the community, they're drinking the water, they're working for it. And so they really have an interest in it as opposed to someone who, maybe is on a call really far away. Does that get at some of your question, Daniel? Did I hit most of it?
Yeah, and it's encouraging in that it's consistent with, I think, what we often tell folks, show up, get involved, have a thoughtful, principled conversation, make your voice heard, those sorts of things. Sometimes easier said than done. And obviously sometimes that's not enough in certain contexts as well. But and those meetings are advertised on the Water Authority's website, and folks know what's up there.
Yeah. So if you on the Beaver Falls Municipal Authority site, if you I think go to about, it says Water Board, the board, and then it has the meetings and has the dates for the entire year. And I think a similar thing. I've been to Aliquippa's site, and I think a similar thing is listed there. Oftentimes, if you're someone who goes in to pay your bill, they'll post something right on the door announcing that a meeting is there. But certainly, just simply calling the folks, the workers there, they can give you the when the meeting is. It's usually once a month. Ours is always the 3rd or 4th Thursday of the month.
Okay, thank you.
Tracy, anything else that would be helpful if, I know some people call you if they have like a complaint about the smell of their water, if they, something along those lines. Yeah.
I think it comes back down to if you see something, say something. I mean, if you see water on the road, or maybe you lost pressure in your house and it seems maybe different than normal. Sometimes we have these ghost leaks that go on for months. And that little bit of information could make a difference, especially if it starts to come from the same area.
Yeah.
Then, we could focus in, which would help me and the plant.
Yeah.
Got it.
And just to add to that, I know, I mean, she's really sincere about that. I know I was, me and a friend, actually, Becky's husband, Jeremy, were running and we saw some water that was coming near one of our tanks at a house. And I called Tracy, and I think you had just heard about it recently, but there was sort of a break. And so finding those breaks can be a challenge. And Daniel, to point out, in some places, you're right, there is a lot of water that's lost. I don't think ours, the Beaver Falls, is 50%. But sometimes sort of that unaccounted for water can be a challenge. Although it's interesting, places that really get at it, like Las Vegas, they only lose about 8% of their water or so because they monitor the whole system because it's so precious out there. They have very little water, but they have microphones installed throughout their system to listen for breaks. So,
well, don't hold me to that 50% figure.
Yeah.
But I know it's not great. Dr. Lau, I see you've raised your hand. Do you have a question?
Yes, question about, is all the water that Beaver Falls has from the river? Is that your only source? No secondary wells or anything?
Correct. That's our only source.
And do you find much variability in the water? You adding the orthophosphate? Don't see much, the trouble that Flint got into with the acidity, the water changing, and therefore they weren't adding the right amount and stuff. Do you go
No.
out into the community and test lead on the other side of the, downstream, you would say? I know supposedly Moon goes out and tests at different residents and stuff to see how much lead that might be picking up, as it's traveling through all the old lines and things.
Are you asking if we test to see if my orthophosphate residual lasts in the system?
Well, yeah, whether it lasts. So not only testing for the lead level when it leaves the plant, but doing some testing, within the community to see how that's working out to keep the lead at bay.
We do test the orthophosphate out in the distribution system when we collect our weekly samples, just to make sure that the concentrations existing out there. I do the triannual leads that were required, but if a customer calls and, I've had quite a few children test positive for lead, so then we start with the water. Anybody that requests it will show up to do it. Really, it's up to them, whatever they'd like. But yes, we do test anytime it's requested.
But you haven't seen much of an issue? It's been pretty stable, or?
No, thankfully. I actually had some known lead service lines and they participate in my triannual testing, and they've had like minimal detections. So I'm grateful for that.
And I had a question about PFAS. You seem to have some different ones and I don't know if that's coming. What kind of contamination you might see, whether you do have some petrochemical stuff. I don't know, mostly agriculture up the rest of the way of the Beaver River or that, but I think you use activated carbon filters to remove the PFAS and all its derivatives. And
sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
We haven't got into like an activated carbon chamber yet. I recently redid my media and I went with anthracite versus the GAC. So I kind of backpedaled on that and thought that maybe I made the wrong decision. But I did tour the plant and center, and they have the carbon chambers for the activation, which we talked with the engineers. And if my levels would get higher, we would consider putting one of those downstream of my filtered water to get rid of the PFAS. When I first did my PFAS testing, I went for the full gamut. There's actually 18 compounds. So I went big, go home, and I think I had 8 of the 18. So yeah, it wasn't nearly the results I was hoping for. So we continued to test after that.
But it's strange somewhat that the EPA has put out I don't know how they put it, not recommendation, but thinking about lowering the PFAS to even almost unmeasurable amounts, like 0.04 parts per trillion, which, as I know, so far the analytical tests don't even kind of work that low. So it's like, why are they doing that if you can't even test that much?
Right. I do agree with that. I think that some of the PFAS compounds were part of the UCMR3 testing, which at that time we didn't have any detections, but I'm sure that the methods for detection have gotten better. So now they're easier to detect. Yeah, I'm not sure why they chose to regulate the 2 that they did, because based on all my sampling, it should be some other compounds, but I don't get to pick. So
Well, supposedly they pick those not necessarily by concentration, but by, toxicological effect that those have ones. But that may be the fact that in most cases, they're more prevalent in the water, so they've done more toxic testing on those, and the ones that you found maybe aren't as readily available in other sources, and so there's not as much information about its toxicity. One last question. I'm always interested in the organics that are in the water, and you indicated from Orvie and stuff about directly testing for benzene or any other volatiles versus just relying upon total organic carbon as a kind of a catch-all for everything.
We unfortunately stumbled upon the benzene. It's earlier this year, basically January, we had a mothball smell on the river. So I ran tests for naphthalene, which came back with a detection. So then 2 weeks later, we do in-house tests every other week for TTHMs and HAAs. The lab contacted us to say that we had a benzene detection in my in-house samples. So at that point, Orsanko stepped in because they were seeing the benzene on the Ohio, and they actually came to the Beaver and pulled samples for me upstream, downstream. They worked their way up to the confluence of the Mahoning, which was the major contributor. And then that's when this kind of all unraveled. So starting at that point, we continued to run for benzene just as a precautionary, because we actually had, I think, xylene and toluene at some point too.
Any idea where the source of these materials? Naphthalene is a pretty unusual one to have.
It was, and it was a whim. It was sort of like, let's send these in and see what happens. And then it spiraled out of control from there. Orsanko traced it up to a outfall on the Mahoning that wasn't on any map. It was like 7 feet under the surface of the water that you would have never seen it unless you were actually on the water. They had a enormous detection there. I think it was like 40 parts per, I don't remember if it was billion or trillion. So they turned that over to the Ohio EPA. The Ohio EPA went back and tested, and they found nothing. So yeah, unfortunately. And that was just within the last month. So it still is a lingering concern of mine because we never found the source, and I don't believe it to actually be gone. So we continue to run samples weekly.
That's
Yeah,
a good idea to do.
Yeah.
And the one other one, I've been concerned about the radioactivity, the alpha and the beta. And I was just trying to find where I had seen that. Moon was saying, because we have some of the frac wells around the airport and stuff, that actually required by the EPA is every 9 years, which I think is a little lax. Normally one would think that once you have your well and you're in the certain rock, it's probably not going to change. But nowadays with all, and you guys having river water and the possibility of all the fracking and petrochemical going on, that there's a larger chance that. But then I found when I was searching, actually, that private wells are supposed to be tested every 3 years, which I find interesting that the private well seems to have a more stringent test protocol than the municipal water supply is. So something that. So do you know the last time you tested for the uranium and was it radium 226 and 228 and the alpha emitters?
Unfortunately, I do
alpha?
not.
All right.
I don't, it's coming up. It was on my sheet, but I'm thinking it might be 2023.
I'll jump in. I do. Tracy may not have been on. I know we tested for maybe it was right before you were on the board, because I remember there was some issue in terms of thinking about, and maybe this has been longer ago, from fracking and that type of thing. So I know we tested specifically for a few months in a row for the radium and a few of the others. that were thought to be from the fracking, and we didn't find any detection. So that was a good thing. And so Tracy, you say you don't remember that testing, so maybe that was maybe Jim was doing that testing. Yeah, we found it. I'll just jump in to say, yeah, so thank you, Cliff, for those great questions. One thing just to point out to everybody is, he's talking about testing, lead as it leaves the plant and gets almost no lead or undetectable amounts are leaving our plant, even somewhere like out. Most plants have almost no lead in them when they're actually leaving the plant, but it's usually the water lines, typically in the homeowner, but sometimes service lines, which can have some of that. And that's where there can be some, although as Tracy pointed out, if it's treated properly, even lead service lines, there's no contact. And so typically, I mean, you still should replace it, but it seems to be a healthy situation at this point. And also, I'll just point out the PFAS that they have been talking about. These are basically long organic compounds which have a lot of fluorine on them, and they're used in things like to make Gore-Tex jackets and firefighting foams and other types of industrial processes. And they tend to be long lasting, so they're not broken down. There's not natural bacteria don't really break them down easily, and so they can stick around, and so they can be found in living organisms and in us. And so that could potentially be bad. However, those are, we don't typically see many of those. I mean, we see at really low levels is really what Tracy was talking about. And even some of the benzene and toluenes that may sound scary, and it sort of is, we should have none. But typically because, starting in Ohio, rain, flood, and everything else coming down, we get really low amounts. And I think typically in the parts per trillion, I think is what we're getting. So really small amounts, and we don't want them there, but we still are concerned, even if it's parts per trillion, which is basically, one little, part in a trillion else of water or something else. So it's really small amount when we want none.
All right. Interesting stuff. Kelly, I see you have your hand raised. I have one more question as well. Let's hear what you have to say, and then we'll move on.
I just had a question with the shell plant starting up. Will there be additional testing that with that coming live and starting to produce in the area, or is it only if you're seeing signs of something wrong?
Yeah,
go
ahead, Tracy.
I was just going to say that when I toured Center, I was surprised they're testing for mercury. And I said, I don't have to do that. And they're like, well, you should be. I said, no, that's not on my testing. So I do think that Center is, the local municipalities are being forced to do some additional testing that maybe the ones who aren't affected are not required.
Okay, so they're being told that these are now required tests to be.
Yes,
okay.
Or at least to get a baseline before startup versus after startup, in my opinion. But maybe Rodney can add to that.
That would be my thought, is that probably there is some additional testing given what we know around the country about these types of plants, that they're going to look for mercury and a few other things. And one of the reasons I think Tracy's right that we don't have to do it is that the water is flowing from the Beaver River into the Ohio, past the fracking plant down to Cincinnati. And so the water in Beaver Falls is not going to be directly impacted by the shell plant, just because we're upriver. And doesn't mean perhaps maybe in the air it could come, but we're really going to have very little impact. And it's going to be the folks, and so it's just not to say we don't care, but it would just be, it'd be the folks, like you said, in Center and a few other places. And then even if there is something that's potentially could go wrong leaking, we go downstream to Cincinnati and beyond. Yeah.
That's what I was I think hinting more at. Will the places that are at that location and downstream, will they be required to do additional? I know you can only talk on Beaver Falls, but does that typically happen, that they would be testing for additional items?
Yeah, I think based on what Tracy was saying, yes. And also Orsanco, they're I think they're an intergovernmental, like they're over multiple states, and they seem to be very proactive in their testing. So I'm sure they've already ramped up some of their testing, what they're going to look for as a new initiative, new project.
Gotcha.
Really quite helpful, folks.
Thanks, Kelly. I'm going to take one moment and just try and bridge a couple worlds here and see if I can. So, there is a growing rise of citizen science in our region. Dr. Lau and Carrie, at least maybe some other folks are, intimately connected to that activity. much of it related to the kinds of developments that you described, Kelly. Are there natural places or ways or connections, for residents who are paying much more attention to what's going on in our region, to interface with the water authority? Is that just a phone call? Is that an email? Same kind of things you've said before. I guess my point is, with the Shell plant coming online, my guess is we're going to have a growth in literacy around the region around these issues. Is the water authority, is that on your radar at all? Is that something that that you've thought about, or is because of the geographic proximity to the facility, is that maybe less of an immediate issue?
I'll just say, yeah, I mean, a lot of it is in terms of with the water authority, what we sort of said before. However, as you point out, Daniel, there are organizations out there like River Keepers. So there's, there's a River Keeper organization in Pittsburgh. And so they really are funding folks who are out on the river, watching it, advocating for the river. There are some folks around the country where there's like Friends of the Beaver River. Not that we have one of those, but there are folks that have organizations where, it's friends of a particular river. And so there is some of this citizen science. And so I guess besides the River Keepers, I don't know of many else. I mean, I guess there's the RAIN, which tends to be a little bit more municipal linkages, and a few of the others that are going. So I guess getting contact with the water authority, or it looks like Carrie talked about Citizens Protect the Ambridge Reservoir. That's a great one. That's probably coming online. The River Keepers and some of the others could be there. Also, the Western Pennsylvania Conservancy, they have a water component. And so I think there's some of that that's coming up where people that are really advocating. And Tracy, I don't know if you have anything else to add, and I know Chris has his hand up as well. So.
No, Chris, you're up.
I just throw in there real quick as it relates to the issue of citizen science. I mean, the Eyes on Shell group, although they're focused specifically on the facility, I mean, obviously that implicates the water issue, and I think be another introduction into that conversation. But Chris.
Yeah, I was just wondering. I think with some of the entities that are the organizations that are kind of around like monitoring air quality, that there are like, ways to like get kind of like home air monitors, or like kind of like ways to test it like as a resident. Are there tests that organizations distribute for like testing your own tap water and looking for things that would be good for citizens to know, or does it kind of all happen at the water authority level?
Yeah, good point. I mean, a lot of it does happen at the water authority level, but you can actually get tested. So for instance, here in New Brighton, there's Campbell's water testing, and actually you can take, you can get bottles, you can take it to them and have them test for certain things. And also on the EPA website, there is a spot where you can go and find a local water tester, so like Campbell's or someone else, that you can actually get it. So if you have an ultimate concern about your, your drinking water, your either it's municipal or even well water, there are, sort of private labs. You don't have to pay for that, but you can actually get the water tested. Although, as Tracy pointed out, there are certain tests that the water authority, if you have a concern, they will do for you. Chris, is that getting at your question?
Yeah, I think so. Just kind of. I think I've heard of like maybe some like home like lead tests or something like that, or different things that you can send in, but just kind of like wondering how far those home tests stretch, how reliable they are, all that kind of stuff. So if there are, I don't know much about it. So
yeah, I think you probably can buy some at the store, but also somewhere like Campbell's or some of the others, they will also, if you pay, they'll give you the bottle and details so you can actually fill up, and because you're supposed to get it after the water's set in your house for 6 hours and that type of thing. So that can be very helpful. Tracy, I know you deal with just sort of the actual testing much more than me. Anything to add for Chris?
I don't think there's like a catch-all at-home test to, cover for everything. I mean, there's so much that you'd have to be specifically focused on whatever you wanted to look for at your home. And it would be pretty expensive, in my opinion, if you wanted to continually do it on your own. So you kind of have to rely on the plant. I mean, we do make house calls for specifics. I mean, if you want chlorine at your house or a fluoride at your house or anything like that, we have service guys. I've gone myself to investigate leaks in a house. So we are kind of at your disposal.
Chris, if you'd asked that question 3 weeks ago, I could have got you a water kit for your wedding present.
You still can.
All right. I
Still
still
can.
can. No, we already got you something. Be quiet. Okay. Well, I'm sure we could keep asking all kinds of questions. We have just a few minutes. I want to transition briefly. RiverWise is not a pile of scientists. We don't aspire to be a pile of scientists. What we are at our core is an organization who's seeking to organize community voice and power. And so if you're looking to RiverWise to kind of be an ongoing chemistry lesson, I think you're probably going to be disappointed. If you're looking to us to help think about how residents could come together more effectively to aggregate their voice and their power, that's where we may be of some use to you. With that observation in mind, I'd love to just open the floor and ask, let me pull up these two questions. These two questions. How could a community organization like RiverWise help you to become a better advocate for healthy water? And what do you need to become a better advocate for healthy water? The answer very well may be we need, round the clock science, education and science. If that's the case, of course, let's hear that. Yeah, think with us where our organization can be of some use to you around these issues. And I would say just unmute yourself and let her rip. I would tell my university students often, I would say, listen, I have 4 kids. If you think that I'm troubled by sitting in silence until you come up with something to say, you're crazy. So I will outweight you.
I was gonna say you need some Jeopardy music while you're waiting, or
There you go.
Well, I guess I have something. I don't know. It's kind of along these lines, but sometimes when I'm being a beginner at learning some of this stuff, I'm constantly trying to understand how some of the discussion that seems important around chemicals and compounds and things like that can be translated to a resident who maybe is not going to dive into learning all the different specificities of those chemicals. And I'm just kind of wondering about, like, if anyone has any ideas around that distance, because it seems like a lot of research, which I think, do people have ideas on ways to simplify that messaging or to make it more relatable for someone who wants to be like, oh, I understand what maybe if they're concerned about the shell plant and don't know what PFAS is and stuff, how do you bridge that gap?
So let me not parrot.
Yeah, can you translate?
Let me say that. Yeah, well, actually, it's funny that you use that word, because here's what I wrote down is, how can community-facing organizations like RiverWise help to encourage that translation to and for the public? Is that roughly what you're saying?
I think so, yeah, because, yeah, I'll just stop there because I'll go down a rabbit hole.
I will say this. I mean, I think, Rodney, I think that was sort of the aspiration, right? When we first started some of these planning meetings was like,
Mhm.
I don't know, I get this report in the mail and like, unless I'm in this world, it just is a bunch of gobbledygook. But there's more to happen for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely, it's a big field. And, I was going to say a little bit earlier, there are literally millions and millions of compounds that we can actually test for. And so there's a small number that, we are knowing that can have an issue. And so we do test for those. And yeah, as part of that, Daniel, I think it's about video 6, maybe, of our 7. I think I do try to delve into that just a little bit to say, all right, here are, we divide most reports divide them up into a couple of different types of things, whether the living organisms or things that are carbon-based, which would organic or maybe the inorganic. And so, but it was just a few minutes, and you're right, it's really a challenge. So even for students in science, right, it can be a challenge to sort of differentiate all of these types of compounds. And there's even some online places where they try to define what these are. So yeah, it would be a challenge, and it would actually maybe be something helpful to maybe start something small, a little bit more than what we've already done in that area.
Okay, Becky, you saw you have your hand up. Love to hear from you for a second or a minute, however long you want to talk. The floor is yours.
Okay. I would just say, my initial response to these questions is that I don't actually know how to answer them. I haven't had a chance to watch the videos yet. It's sort of on my list of things to do this fall, which is a very long list. So, I think generally though, but yeah, as a person who doesn't really know a lot about chemistry, and so here's a lot of chemical names and they don't necessarily mean a lot. I know enough to know that I don't know a lot about it. And so that not every chemical that I read is a big scary thing just because in another context, something similar is. But I think that might, I don't know. I need to watch the videos, but yeah, trying to figure out how to advocate or what I do need to advocate. I've always had a sense that it's sort of beyond an average person, that it's more about pollution and like just these big things that happen that we can't control. So, so sort of kind of kicking that question back, like, what do I need? I don't know. I don't know what I need. I'll start with watching the videos, but I'm really interested to continue to learn more about this. So,
well, Becky, I appreciate your honesty and forthrightness, because there are some assumptions baked into the question, right? I mean, by virtue of asking the question, how can we help you? We're assuming that issue has been settled. And I think what you just gave voice to is actually true of many issues, certainly here in Beaver County, and I would argue probably more broadly in the human experience. It's like we have these increasingly complex and interconnected challenges, and we're trying to get people to care about them and do something about them, and like they just don't even know where to start, and I'll include myself in that pile of people who often are not sure where to begin on some of these things. We have made a bet at RiverWise, and it's a bet, and we might be wrong, although I bet you we're not. We have made a bet that one of the first things that we need to do as an organization is to encourage and convince people that they are part of the solution, whatever that solution is. That they have a voice, that they have a capacity, that we have resources, and there are levers that we can pull if we kind of get organized and link arms and walk down the road together. We've been making that argument for 4 years now as an organization. We're getting to the point now where we have to make good on some of those initial claims and promises. And that will necessarily require something beyond just trying to get people to care. Like we gotta dig into issues, and we gotta organize, and all of those sorts of things. But it's no small hurdle to get over that first hump, to be sure. So Dr. Lau, you have a comment?
Yeah, I would say just doing things like this, what I find is a lot of times the students aren't aware, I ask them whether or not they've ever looked at their water analysis report. And they go, what? We get a report? You know, and that kind of stuff. So having programs like this or getting out and making the people, the citizens aware that they do need to be concerned about their water. And it seems from what I've heard from the Beaver Falls, you guys are very open to having people attend the meetings and asking questions. And that's what we need is people take their water too much for granted, and it is a very precious resource, and we want to make sure that it stays as good as possible. And the only way you can do that is, you know, by being involved. You don't have to be a chemist to understand all this. When you have other people that work at the water authority and stuff that understand that, but you have to, you know, ask questions and see what's going on so that you have an idea of what is the quality of your water and whether you need to do other things to protect it or whatever.
Well, thank you for that. That's encouraging. Rodney, this wasn't all a waste of time. That's what I just heard. Yeah, Bethany, are you waving
Hi.
at me or you want to say something?
Yeah, both.
Okay.
So I'm just thinking about how, like, what as a consumer, as a business owner who who heavily relies on water, I was wondering maybe something that I don't know how feasible this is that would be really helpful to lay people like myself is, you know, when that maybe RiverWise could be a part of this, when that CCR comes out, have somebody do a quick video that is shareable, because not everybody opens the mail, not everybody reads it. If they do read it, as everybody has said, if you don't know the science, you don't know what those scary chemicals are, and you just think, wow, I'm gonna die. That's like all you can think. And you're like, save the children. I don't know what to do. Even though there might not be anything actually dangerous listed in that report, it might be helpful to have like a 30-second video, even if it's, you know, Rodney or somebody going through every community's thing. Hey, this is Aliquippa's. This is what's important. This is what you need to know. These are the risks. These are what's going well. See you later next year. That kind of thing. Just a real quick.
It's fascinating. It's like
I love that.
Yeah.
ESPN for CCRs, right?
Yeah, and it's shareable. And then the important stuff, the truth, because a lot of people don't know the truth and they have maybe ideas that are just kind of like passed around, like, oh, they're putting chemicals in our water. Well, yeah, to clean it, you know, like sounds scary, but what is actually the truth needs to be out there. And somebody who has, you know, a science understanding and a lay person's way of talking about it might be helpful.
That's really clever. Well, I mean, the workload there is not wild, right? I mean, we're talking 3 of these a year for the whole county, something like that.
Yeah, let's put it on Rodney.
I was just
I mean,
gonna say, I think he's up for it.
Yeah.
I think he's good for it. What do you think, Rodney?
I could try it. It would be fun to try, especially since they come out in July, right? So I would have some
Yeah.
summer to do that. But
You
yeah.
could. Even it could be like it could be even set up like 2 people, like a lay person and a scientist. You know, like, you know, Becky could ask you a question and you could answer it. And it takes like 30 seconds. It's a quick sound bite that just gets the, you know, gets it out there.
Yeah, I'm writing that down. That's actually kind of exciting. Go ahead, Daniel.
I love it. I mean, I think it's here's why I love this, Bethany. From an organizational standpoint, it plays on our strengths and diminishes our weaknesses. Like we can't, RiverWise will not be in a position perpetually to translate science to the public. That's not our skill set. But we can get a video camera and a storyteller in front of a scientist a couple times a year and distribute the snot out of helpful content. You know, like that is in our wheelhouse. I'm almost thinking, I don't know, you could really start to play with this, like, you know, like the Emmys or something, you know, like who won the PFAS award in 2023 or who, you know, like, I mean, you can do some really interesting creative things with what seems like an otherwise super drab topic. All right, I set an alert that Kelly Powell is going to put this in our calendar, and Chris is going to help us build a production schedule around helping to tell some of these stories. Maybe we need to impanel a small board of scientists to help interpret those things and make sure we're getting our collective message in order.
And are they
I think
all in July? Is that like a standard?
Yeah, I think they have to be published by July 1. Is that right, Tracy?
I believe so. I have to get it to my consecutives by March, and then I think it has to be distributed to the public by July.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. So my point, Kelly, was just that it's sort of like, I think most people, they're still accumulating the data, building the brochures. And so probably that May, June is probably when most people are getting it out to the public at large.
So there would be time then if the report is being assembled, if we have the information to produce this ahead of time. So the reports come out that weekend, there's videos, so that there's no lag and there's no like, oh, it looks like they're just covering their bases, but it's like a rollout, at the same time.
Sounds like that would be possible with Beaver Falls. Whether or not the other
Right.
entities would agree to that is an open question. But if you guys start setting the standard for transparency and translatability, maybe other communities want to get in line. Bethany, I love it. Others interesting or not interesting observations or questions or suggestions? We don't discriminate at 8:30.
Well, we just put in the chat about the environmental working group is a good website. However, I usually caution my students that they are very conservative. And if you look at your water, you may get a little bit alarmed because sometimes they use California or desired standards and not necessarily the EPA, but it's a good source of just seeing how your water compares to others. And they do go into some pretty good detail about what you do need to be concerned about.
Thank you.
And Daniel, I'll just add about, you were saying about it does help to have a healthy conversation, and particularly if the public is, sort of clamoring or asking for information, I think, that can lead to more transparency generally. I mean, I guess some people could retreat, but, like I said, at Beaver Falls, we do try to be, I think, transparent. We have our CCRs published on our website, going all the way back to at least 2012. And, we, as Tracy said, there's some things which we don't have to publish in our CCR, which we put in there just because we're trying to have information. I think some of the, and I think, like in the video I talked about Billings, Montana, and they have like, this really wonderful brochure. I mean, they really put lots of extra paragraphs of information leading to all sorts of things. So, but I think that conversation can help with the transparency.
Sure. All right, well, it's 8:35. My son is clamoring for me to put him to bed, and my caffeine is wearing off. So listen, tonight was an experiment of sorts. We've never done this kind of thing before, and we've never put this kind of programming together before. I just want to say, certainly to Rodney, thank you for coming along on that journey, and not really coming along. I mean, leading the parade. It was a beyond commendable first whack at an idea here, and it lives on probably past all of us at this point. So we tried to build it in a way that it could be a resource. Feel free to utilize or share that any and everywhere that it makes sense. I would encourage you to continue thinking about some of the more global kinds of questions that we asked toward the end here, like how can we be helpful? For good or for bad, RiverWise is willing to try things, and we are interested to figure out how we can be a service to the community within, our defined and understood skill set. So, gosh, be a resource. You all have been kind of a focus group for us here tonight. That doesn't have to end when we hang up. I really appreciate those of you who came and participated, and yeah, let's keep at it. Stay tuned. We're going to kind of regroup and rethink this. and see what some next steps might be to carrying some of this forward. In the meantime, reach out if you have any questions. Last thing, you see Chris over there. Chris is been tasked with a handful of kind of interconnected objectives. If you go back to that slide about eco-district thinking, I don't know if that's still up. Am I still sharing my screen or not?
Yes.
I am.
Yes.
If you go back to this slide, you see these 6 quality of life areas on the right-hand side of the screen. Chris is always trying to source folks who are willing to talk with him on camera about these issues. And in particular, he's interested in understanding community insight and experience around water in the region. So if you want to sit down and have a free therapy session with Chris, he will get you to say things you never imagined possible and dive into the recesses of your brain. And yeah, exciting. He's an exciting interviewer. Please email
Nobody will
Kelly.
sign up now. Thanks to your-
He'll take you out for coffee or something. I don't know. It's beautiful. It's a really powerful and fun experience. So email Kelly at getriverwise.com. That's KELLY at getriverwise.com, and she will figure out a good time that you all can get together. And I promise you'll be honored and dignified by Chris's time with you, for sure. And we'd love to hear how you're relating to any or all of these issues, but particularly the issue of water. So I think that's all I have. Thank you again, and see you next time, whenever that is. All right. Thank you all.